Hey everybody, Koldar here. Today we're looking at Garalon normal difficulty in Heart of Fear. And this is a really cool fight. I think it's a lot of fun. It has some new mechanics which we haven't really seen before, so that's always neat to see. And essentially this fight is not a standard encounter where you just tank the boss and do your thing. Instead it's all about kiting the boss. He's obviously a giant insect. You can barely even see his body most of the time. So instead, he just moves very slowly, and he always chases one player around the room. This is the player that is debuffed with pheromones. But before I get into that, because that's really the crux of the fight, I'll talk about all the other aspects of it, the puzzle pieces that sort of fit together that make up how you handle the pheromones itself. So, when you engage, you'll notice that there are 4 legs, each indicated by a dashed sort of teal line below them. And if you are within this circle for the leg, you gain a stack of weak points, which is a buff that will increase your damage dealt to the leg you are nearest to by 100% while you're in the circle. However, this does not increase the damage you deal to other legs that you're not within the circle of. There's 4 unique spell IDs for the weak points buff in the game files. So the game basically knows if you're in the circle for one leg, you're getting this particular weak points buff, and it doesn't help you attack other legs. You can still do damage to the other legs while you're in a circle for one, but you won't get the 100% bonus, and therefore you don't really gain much benefit from doing that. Every time you kill a leg, it's dead for a while. But every 30 to 35 seconds, a random leg will be respawned using the Mend ability by Garalon. But the legs don't have very much health, and because of the 200% damage bonus, you should be able to kill them very quickly. So most of the time, after the initial killing of the 4 legs, you'll only be attacking one leg at a time, pretty much. Each time a leg dies, it deals damage equal to its health to Garalon. So basically, each leg does about 3% of his health when you kill it. So it's always preferable, if you can, to attack a leg from within the circle, because you'll be doing about twice the DPS that you would to just attacking his body. And every time a leg dies, it will debuff Garalon, slowing his movement speed by 15% per stack. So obviously 3 legs being dead most of the time is about 45% constant slow, sometimes 60. And that should happen through the rest of the fight after the initial pull. The next element is underneath him, you'll see this large purple circle, and this is basically a no-fly zone. No one should ever enter that for any reason. If you step in there, you'll immediately trigger Crush, which he just used a moment ago for a different reason. But Crush basically does heavy AE damage to the raid, physical damage. It's around 150,000, so quite hefty. But if you are within the purple circle when you Crush lands, it does 800,000, so it just kills you, essentially. It will also sort of knock you down or stun you for 2 seconds when it lands. So just be aware of that you'll be temporarily stunned. So essentially just no one ever should enter the purple circle. If you have to move to the other side for some reason, either it's not a good reason because the leg doesn't need to be killed by you in particular, or you just have to take your time and go around it. Anyway, so next up we have a cone attack called Furious Swipe. And if you look on the right of the screen, top right, you'll see it land in a second. There it is there. It's that shoot up rock sort of looking effect. So this is cast every 8 seconds in front of him in a cone, and it does about 300,000 physical damage to anyone in the cone. But if it does not hit at least 2 targets every time, Garalon will gain a stack of a Fury buff. And this lasts 30 seconds, and it increases the damage and movement speed of Garalon by 10% per stack. So obviously you don't want this to stack up, and that's sort of where the quote-unquote tank role is played throughout the fight, by staying in front of him, making sure at least 2 people are hit every time he casts it, and then you won't get Fury stacks. Now, because it lasts 30 seconds, it's not the end of the world if he gets a stack or two here and there, as long as you just prevent him from continuing to stack it by making sure 2 people soak the swipe every time after that. And then he'll drop it after 30 seconds, and then you'll be cool after that. So for the most part, if you use tank spec tanks, that's going to be their job, is to stay in front and soak that swipe attack. However, you can use high mitigation, high physical mitigation targets that are not tanks, so to speak, if you want, or if you need the DPS, for example. So you can use, Rep Paladin, Holy Paladin, or just DPS plate user, basically, or just regular tanks. Obviously, tanks take a lot less damage from that attack. They can even avoid it often. So, yeah, it's up to you. So that really covers all the main components of the fight outside of the biggest one, which is pheromones. So as you may see, there's all this stuff around the edge, these amber pools. And at the start of the fight, I was stacked up in the front right corner by the stairs, and you couldn't see it, but on the left, front left corner by the stairs as well, was about the other half of the raid, with the exception of one player, or a warlock in this case, and he was stacked, or excuse me, just standing by himself in the middle of the stairs, halfway between the corner groups. So the reason for this is that the initial pheromones debuff, when you engage Garalon, is cast on the player nearest to Garalon about 2 seconds after you attack him. So it doesn't have anything to do with who pulls first or who has highest threat or anything like that. It's just simply when he casts that first pheromones, which is about a second or two into it. Well, you'll see it here, actually. So there it is on our warlock. And he's to my left, just off screen. So we all wait in that corner, making sure not to run in early. And then once pheromones actually lands, we rush forward and engage the boss and do our thing. So the person with pheromones should try to be at max range if possible, because as soon as they get the buff, they'll start dropping these pheromone pools on the ground. About every 2 seconds, they'll drop a pool. And the pool obviously does damage if you stand in it. So the idea here is to drop pools around the outside edge of the room so that it's safe for the rest of your raid on the inside to not have to worry about standing in pools and do their thing, attacking the boss. That said, pheromones also does damage to the raid. It does 15,000 nature damage every 2 seconds. And the player with pheromones active will gain a stacking buff called pungency. This is applied every 2 seconds as well, and every stack increases the damage from pheromones to the entire raid by 10% per stack. So obviously 10 stacks means 15,000 damage goes up to 30,000 every 2 seconds. Since the stacks are every 2 seconds, you can kind of determine how long a player will hold pheromones before they'll reach X stacks or X% increase. And this will help you determine how long you can hold the pheromone debuff. That said, when you get your last stack of pungency and trade pheromone to a new player, pungency lasts for 2 minutes from the last tick of it. So you need a rotation of pheromone players that can kite the boss that will allow the initial pungency stack on the first player to expire within the 2 minute time. In this case, we decided that 20 plus stacks was the best time to trade. So that means every person is holding pheromones for about 40 to 42 seconds baseline. And therefore, that means 3 people with 40 seconds equals the 2 minute timer we need for the fourth or initial person to drop their pungency stack. So if you want to be comfortable, I suggest 4 people. But if you can manage the healing to go up to 30 stacks on a person, which obviously 300% damage is a lot, then you can actually cut the rotation number of players down to 3 people and just do it every 30 stacks, which is every 60 plus seconds. Anyway, to actually trade to trade pheromones, the player with current pheromones simply needs to be in melee range touching a new player. As soon as they do, the new player will get the pheromones debuff, and there's about a 2-second grace period in which pheromones will cease to jump to new players. And during this grace period, you simply have to get away from each other so that it doesn't just immediately jump back to the original target. So it's a good idea to basically plan out where people are going to move. And our pheromones rotation consisted of one range DPS, then a tank, then a range DPS, then a tank, over and over. So our Warlock was first, and we chose our Warlock because he can get a talent to move and cast at the same time. And obviously tanks are good because they take less damage, and I'll talk about why else in a second. And then our other DPS was our Elemental Shaman, again, because he can cast and move at the same time. So just kind of maximizing DPS for those players is ideal. So after the Warlock, our first tank grabs it from him. And the way we had it set up is that since tanks have to stay in front of the boss to soak the Furious Swipe cone attack, but the ranged kiter that may have pheromones does not want to be close enough to get that, the tanks have to time when they run out to get pheromones off the ranged player. Since you have 8 seconds between Furious Swipes, if you're a tank going to pick up pheromones, you need to wait for one swipe to hit, immediately run out, grab the pheromones off the ranged player who will be out of the cone radius, and then run back in so you're going to be in the range of the next Furious Swipe attack before it hits. You have 8 seconds, obviously, so it's quite a long time. But the other thing is to make sure, as a tank, you don't run too close to the other tank and accidentally pass pheromones before you want to. So what this essentially means is that the non-pheromone tank needs to stay really close to the front of the boss, just outside the purple circle range, but in front of him so that they will get the Furious Swipe cone hit. And this allows your pheromone tank, who's kiting at the time, to stay far in the back, but still in range of that cone, since it's a pretty large size. And so then you wait for your 20 stacks or higher, and then the next player comes in, which will be a range this time. So again, you got to time it so that you wait for Furious Swipe, and then you go in and grab the pheromones off the tank, but then immediately the tank moves forward toward the front of the boss, while the ranged person moves backward away from the cone range. And this will also allow you to not pass pheromones accidentally. So basically the rule for us was, if you're passing pheromones and you're a tank, you move forward slightly, and if you're ranged, you move backward slightly around the edge of the room. And this would allow us to trade it fast enough so that we wouldn't hit that grace period of 2 seconds and pass it again accidentally. So the last thing is that every time you pass pheromones, it obviously trades the pheromone debuffs. So even though pungency stacks remain on the previous person, the new person does not have pungency, and therefore the damage from the AE goes back down. So it starts at 15,000 again and starts stacking up. He also will cast Crush one time every time you pass pheromones. So you need to make sure your healers get the raid topped off when Crush is about to hit so that it doesn't kill anyone. So that pretty much covers everything. It's a cool fight. There's quite a bit of healing. And I guess I didn't mention, we decided to heal it, and it worked out pretty well, but monks are extremely strong for that fight. So if you don't have one, it might be a little different. But yeah, basically it's mostly AE damage and then focus damage on the tanks. So our paladin focused on healing the tanks and the kiter primarily, and then I just focused on raid damage as a monk. So yeah, that's normal Garalon. I think that covers it. Good luck, and thanks for watching.